Good morning. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show for Monday, April 12th. It's our live broadcasts are coming along on the Western Standard. We'll cover some of the pressing news, which unfortunately is going to be mostly COVID-based again. You know, we're all sick and tired of COVID, sick of talking about it. I'm looking forward to whenever the time comes down the road when we can be reporting on and discussing political things that aren't COVID related. But unfortunately, this thing really is actually dominating our lives, and we've got to keep going on about it. But hopefully we're working our way out of it. So today I've got a panel coming up in a little while of some individuals who've been impacted by COVID. I mean, we all are, but it's not the COVID itself, it's the restrictions. And all we hear about on the media end of things, of course, is about the damage that the virus and the pandemic itself causes. Fair enough, but they are not showing the other side. Like this whole thing in business, everywhere else, in your own life, even if you're doing it unconsciously, you do cost-benefit analysis on when you're going to do something. When you're going to take an action, you've got to think of the reaction. Is what you're doing worth it? Is it going to be better for it? Or are you causing more damage than what you're hoping to do? And we only see one side. We're only hearing about the negative of the COVID, but we're not hearing about the negatives of what these restrictions are doing, and not just businesses, but on mental health with people and so many other levels. So I'm going to talk to some people about that. We really need to hear more of it. I mean, I was listening to the media all weekend. Yesterday, the big report, oh my Lord, the variants are coming, the big variant boogeyman. The latest thing is they keep moving the goalposts, and there's new things to keep coming up to tell us why we can't lift restrictions, why we can't start letting people live their lives again. The flavor of the month is variants. So we are indeed seeing some more people in hospital, a few more in ICU, but again, we're nowhere close to overwhelming them. I remember they were setting up field hospitals a year ago from now. We were supposed to be able to have hundreds and hundreds of people in ICU if we needed to, and we never needed to. This isn't the plague. This isn't the Spanish flu, contrary to what they're saying. The thing that the news didn't report on, it's funny, dead silent. One person passed away, and I know a lot of people like to debate that with or of COVID, but one person yesterday out of 4.4 million people in Alberta, one person died. And that's tragic for the one person, but I don't know how old that person was. Really, how long were they going to be here? We want to extend life as much as possible. I'm not trying to be glib, but we've got to look at the cost benefit here. 4.4 million people, one passed away. This is not a huge thing. It's good news, but they don't report the good news. Let's talk about that. People aren't dying as much. It's great. Not hearing about it. It's also been a big weekend of protests. People are getting tired of this. They're finally starting to stand up, push back a bit, and speak up on things. And so at the Grace Life Church site, I mean, the fences were set up by the police. They bound it right in. They knew that this is going to be a problem, so they try to be proactive. But of course, all it did was infuriate people. I mean, we're already infringing on free association, infringing on free religion. And then to put up these fences and say you can't even get close to that church. Well, the protesters came out in the hundreds. We saw, mixed behavior. Some just wanted to quietly protest. Some actually came and started ripping some of the fences down. In Quebec, I mean, there were outright riots. They've had people in the street smashing things, which again, this isn't a good outcome. This is not good at all. I don't want to see that. This is damaging. We're not the left, guys. We don't rip stuff apart. There were some other anti-mask activists, I guess, in Calgary it was a bizarre video. I don't know. They were trying to force their way into a Whole Foods outlet without masks, and they were screaming at security and stuff. Okay, guys, I know you're frustrated, but this isn't the way we're going to do it. By the way, I see Sarah's been posting links in the comment section to the Angry Albertan. I think probably that's the video. He had Dr. Modry and another doctor on this live this morning. They were talking about the COVID lockdowns and impacts from a doctor's point of view. Those are the ones also that were on with Danielle Smith when she had that series of specials here with the Western Standard talking about those things. And they give a great common sense point of view. And I did catch a little bit of that live show. One of the things the doctor brought up was the Great Barrington Declaration, and not enough talk has been going on about that. I mean, people like to shut down debate, and they say, you're not an epidemiologist, you're not an MD, you can't talk about it. Well, go to the Great Barrington Declaration. This came out last fall, and it's signed by thousands of doctors, epidemiologists, these experts, and they're saying that the restrictions they aren't helping. I mean, you're trying to bottle something that isn't working. We're seeing, we can look around, we see the news. Texas is still doing just fine. They predicted doom and gloom for them a month ago when they opened up. They said, we're opening up. And I know they got more vaccinations than us, but they didn't have more than us when they opened a month ago. And all the experts were screaming. They were saying, Texas is doomed. These guys are suicidal. It's going to be horrible. Well, the experts, as usual, again, were wrong. Texas is doing okay. Hey, the COVID is still rampaging to a degree down there. There's still some folks dying of it, but not nearly, and it's going down. It's declining. It's coming towards its end. We need to come towards an end. So with all these protests, Quebec, I mean, again, there's one of those examples. Quebec's had far more restrictive things than us. Far more. They have curfews. Curfews. Think about that. You are literally not allowed outside of your house past a certain hour. It's only ever been imposed at wartime. And this isn't like a war, guys. I mean, think of how dangerous this is, to give the government the power to lock you in your house literally at night, arrest you for going outside. And that's what's going on. Or what? As I said, in Alberta, 4.4 million people, one died yesterday. One. And I don't think lockdowns would have saved that person. But we're not talking about that. And we've got to. So the pushbacks are coming, though. And I mean, we're seeing it. Premier Kenney's, he's having a hard time because people have had enough and they are pushing back. So I went last weekend. I put a video special up as well, by the way, to on our YouTube channel, because I'd heard about this rodeo coming up, and it's hosted by Ty Northcott, and it's a family that's been in the rodeo business for generations. Literally, they're going broke. I mean, they're sitting on rodeo stock. They're spending a fortune trying to maintain it. They haven't been able to have events. It's costing them. They're about to go bankrupt. A family that's been at it for generations, they're out. And in agriculture and rodeo, we're seeing that all over. So he said, you know what? I'm holding a rodeo at the end of the month. I don't care what Alberta Health Services is. And they're already threatening him. They're already getting on his case. He's got it scheduled, though, for April 30th, May 1st, and May 2nd. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You can get the tickets at rodeo.rally@gmail.com. And there will be tickets available on site, too. There will be camping. It's a great way to get out and push back. It's not screaming protests. It's not rioting. It's not any of that kind of craziness. This is just people getting up and saying, we've had enough. We're going to get together. We're going to support this local business. We're going to gather. We're not going to be told what to do any longer on this sort of thing. We can't afford it. So that was really refreshing. We're going to be following up on that. I'm definitely going to be going to that rodeo myself. Now, I do have to mention our sponsor, who is Penny at chironsway.com. And she has been sponsoring our live shows for quite some time now. Just a reminder to everybody, we don't get tax dollars to run the Western Standard. We rely on direct subscribers to our publication, advertisers, things like that. But that allows us to report on these things. It's funny with the mainstream media. Why do you think part of the reason is that they don't touch anything else? Why are they so scared all the time? Well, they're dependent on government funding. They don't want to rock the boat. So people like Penny at chironsway.com have sponsored us, and it really helps. She offers for people who have stress, anxiety issues, things such as that, counseling, dietary counseling, changes that you can do in your lifestyle, non-pharmaceutical ways to cope with the stress and challenges and things that are going on today. And please, give her consideration. She's supporting us. We'll certainly support her, and it's really appreciated. And consider subscribing to the Western Standard. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to Facebook. Like on it so you don't miss any of these specials. It's really appreciated, and it keeps us rolling. So what shall I get on to? Our panel is starting to come together here. Oh, yeah. I digressed on that. When we're finished with the panel, I am going to have an interview with Jeremy Farkas, who's running for the mayor of Calgary. It's a good long one. Since Mayor Ninchie is not running again, it's definitely going to be a turning point mayoral race. We're going to have a new mayor at the end of it one way or another. Who it is, well, time will tell. But Jeremy, I would personally feel, is so far the front runner. Of course, he was the first out of the gate. And we'll see where he goes. Let's see. So, yeah. We have, I'm just going to show some of the headlines from the weekend with the Grace Life Church, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. It's John Carpe running that. He's been doing excellently in legally standing up for the people who are making a stand. We also saw the Whistle Stop Diner in Red Deer, by the way, and some businesses were trying to open up on the weekend in defiance of the lockdown. AHS were on them like nobody's business. They didn't wait. They don't want to let things slide again. And it's too bad. It's getting out of control. People have had enough. And I think as much as they try to quash all this, they're playing whack-a-mole. Frustrated people are going to get up. And people like John Carpe, thankfully, and his organization are, if you want to look it up, I think it's jccf.ca. They're standing up for Albertans' rights on this, and they're taking it to the courts. And I believe the state is afraid of going to the courts because, we saw the charges dropped against Coates. They didn't want to go to discovery. They didn't want to see all this happen. The same thing with the Whistle Stop restaurant. They threaten, they push, they corner them, but when push comes to shove in the end, they tend to back off. And that's because they don't want to actually see the scrutiny of their policies in front of a judge in detail. Here's another beauty coming up from, Stephen Gilbolt. I'm sorry, I'm slaughtering the French pronunciation. Either way, he's our heritage minister, and the Liberals have really been working hard on trying to shut down basically free speech on the internet. They want to control it. They want to control information. They want publications like this where, we speak outside of the mainstream. They don't want to see it anymore. They're looking at pulling the pin. And that's literally what they're talking about. That's what he said on a podcast. They might have an area where you can actually have a kill switch for the internet, cut people off so they can't hear and see contrary information. People, we are in a dangerous time. There's nothing, an authoritarian government, one of the first things they will always do is try to control information, try to cork the bottle. Don't let people discuss things. Then they can control what's going on. So please stand up, keep an eye on this. This is an election year, and this is a very, very distressing trend. Another thing we got to look forward to before I get to our panel here, inflation is starting to come along. We're finally starting to hear economists and others talk about it. People have mentioned it for a while, but it hasn't been talked about nearly enough because, you see, we're borrowing. We're borrowing on every level of government. We're just printing money like nobody's business. The whole world is doing it. Inflation is inevitable. I'm surprised it hasn't hit yet. And if you think times are tough now, just wait until your purchasing power goes down to a quarter of what it was. And they're starting to actually discuss it, saying the Bank of Canada needs to manage inflation expectations. Well, yeah, but there's only one way they can really manage it, and that'll be by raising interest rates. And for people who are living on the edge right now, suddenly having to pay more in interest on the debt that they've already taken on personally is going to be catastrophic. If we want to work on the economy, we want to work on inflation, we need to open up. That's all there is to it. We've got to stop throttling the movement of our people and our businesses and our commerce, or inflation and a great many things are going to bring us down. So that's enough of my starting rant for now. Like I said, I've got a panel of a few individuals. It'll be refreshing. It's something different with not me with a bunch of political wonks as I usually am. It's lost my screen there. Haha. This is a great thing of a one-man show. So these are people impacted by the pandemic, though, and that's what we need to hear more of, and in ways that people don't necessarily always think of. And we want to hear from what people are going through. As I said, with that cost-benefit analysis, we've got to think of the other side. Even if it doesn't impact you, think a little longer. Is it impacting your neighbor? How is it impacting them? What's happening there? So I'm going to bring these folks into the feed here. We've got Christopher, Charlotte, and Tennille. So thank you all for joining me today on this somewhat chilly spring Monday in spring, but we're getting there. And, I can only bring on so many because there's such a diverse amount of people impacted in so many different ways by restrictions, lockdowns, and so on. But with three, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat about this, because it adds broadens perspective for people and listeners as to what's been happening. So I'll begin with Christopher, and I'll go through each of you to start with here. So Christopher, an area we've dealt with in the pandemic and the lockdowns and the restrictions and such has been people have had their healthcare deferred. We've had surgeries deferred, things that they call elective. Well, they can still really impact somebody's functioning and their living. You've dealt with this in a terribly dangerous way. Can you expand a bit on how the restrictions have impacted your healthcare?
Sure. At the end of November, I had a fairly serious heart attack, and I was lucky enough to be close to the Mazankowski, which is, I can't say enough good things about them. They saved my life, and I was determined after that to do whatever it took to recover fully and be as healthy as possible after that. And, getting to the hospital and having them do what they do right then and there is not the complete picture. Recovery from a heart attack is a long process, and it involves a lot of people. We're very lucky in Alberta to have a coronary cardiac rehab program that's excellent. The problem is it's been shut down. And so for me, I've not been able to do any of the things that'll take me through the rest of this process to get my heart healthy and give me the years that going through that process can give you. People that complete this program have longer lifespans than heart attack victims who do not. And I want that. I want to live. I want to be healthy. And I've not been able to go to this program. Now, some of the parts of it are have gone virtual, but you can't do the exercises and the physical cardiac rehab, through Zoom or whatever. And so, in my case, I live in order for us to live near my wife's work, we were in a neighborhood where we can only afford a very small place. So we don't have room for, exercise equipment and whatnot. I was counting on being able to go to that rehab center and use the facilities that are there that our taxes pay for. And so I'm not alone in this. I mean, I don't know how many people, but I've talked to, and I don't want to put anybody in the spot, but I've talked to some of the staff at the Mazankowski and then the rehab program, and they're frustrated as well because they know that, there's ways we could have screened this and make this safe and get the people that need to get there. But when we have politicians and administrators making decisions on policy about lockdowns instead of at the battlefront doctors and scientists, then this is what happens. You get policies that hurt people. So that's kind of my story, I guess, as far as that goes.
No, I understand, and I appreciate that because, again, it's just something we don't consider necessarily. And if a person is harmed or dies because of having withheld health care, and healthcare, as you said, it's farther down the line, and we've got some fantastic facilities, we've got some fantastic health experts, but access to it has always been a challenge for us. And now that we're choking it, it's dangerous. So we see that with a lot of other aspects too. I mean, people are putting off getting checked up when they get a strange lump because they're worried about going to the hospital right now. We've got other wings and treatment things that, again, are being deferred. Surgeries that are right now are considered elective, but might turn into something very acute if you put it off too much longer. And it's just all got to be considered when we put it together. So we'll come back to you, and I'll move on to the next person here with Charlotte. So Charlotte's, I believe, been laid off for the third time now. You're in the hospitality industry. This is an area that we do hear about the most because it's really just completely does get slammed in business if we have restrictions come in. And the people working within it, the people who own those businesses. I owned a pub for 5 years. That's where my hair got so gray. I aged about 15 years during that period. I wouldn't take one again for free, but it is a workout, and bless those who love that lifestyle and want to run it. And it's important to us. They provide social benefit. They provide gathering. They provide food. And of course, they provide employment to a great many people. So what has your experience been, Charlotte?
Well, let me see. Okay, so really, like we locked down last year. It's hard to believe it was a year now. The end of March, and at that point we were locked down for I think 3 months, and then we go back to work, and then we went back to work for the summer, about 3 or 4 months or something like that. And then we locked down again over Christmas, and then this time we went back to work for 2 months. So the spaces that we're able to work, like in my case, I'm a server bartender in a restaurant in the West End of Edmonton. They're becoming smaller, these little plots that in between lockdowns that we can work are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's very alarming. Like what's the plan there? Where I'm not really sure, but yeah, obviously it's quite the sensation knowing that your job is just hanging in the balance of, you know, what the government has decided they're going to do with you. You know, it's like they've proven, or they've done for 3 times, they can just take it whenever they deem appropriate, which is, as far as I know, like that's not a thing. The government just illegally taking your job away, your right to earn an income. And then, you know, it's okay, we have EI for you, and obviously that's nowhere near what I make when I go to work, you know. And it's just, honestly, it's very, very, very confusing. It's very confusing. There have been no large, huge outbreaks in typical dine-in settings. Okay, nightclubs are a different issue, but I don't know. That's not my case. Particularly, I work in a typical dine-in family restaurant setting. There have been no major outbreaks as far as I know. We have done everything. We have spent money. We have done everything right, everything they tell us to do so we can stay open. And that time and time again, now 3 times or I guess twice, has become, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter how much money you spend. You know, then now they're saying you need to build an inside outside, because you can't have indoor dining. And in my case, specifically, we don't actually have a patio, so we don't have that option. It's just shut down again. You know, it's completely bizarre to me. It's completely bizarre situation where you just kind of sit around. You're sitting duck. I guess that's what it is. You're a sitting duck waiting for the government to tell you that your job is no longer essential. And I do remember Jason Kenney saying in November that it's not his position to decide what job, you know, if you feed your family, then that is essential. And now we're going back to dine-in not being essential. You know what? I would disagree. I do think dine-in is essential. You know, you get to go meet out with friends, you get to discuss things, you get to meet people, you get to talk to your different servers. And I absolutely do believe it is an essential part of the social aspect. Humans are social beings. And, you know, just the other day, me and my boyfriend are like, why don't we go for supper? Oh, we can't do that, you know, because it's illegal. It's just madness. It's just utter madness to me, to wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah, well, and the arbitrary nature of it is just frustrating and maddening. I mean, it's an industry, and people have to understand just how sensitive it is too. And you know, it's a narrow margin industry, because you get some people just say, "Oh, it's okay, you can do takeout, and it's okay, you can do a patio."
No. Yeah.
A patio is a tiny fraction of your business if you have one. As you said, you don't, and the weather doesn't always cooperate with your patio. Takeout, the food, the reality in a restaurant, you're going to make a tiny amount of money on the food. Most of your income's on the liquor. You've got to sell us some drinks.
Yes,
that's 100%. Where you're going to get some profit.
Yeah.
As well, not every restaurant is well geared for takeout. If you're a steakhouse, do you ever order a steak to get delivered? Of course not. It doesn't keep well. If you had a pizza place or a fish and chip spot, well, you're fortunate. You're in sort of a kind of a good spot for delivery sort of thing. Well, even the fish will get a little soggy, but not every restaurant's well equipped to deal with that as well. Yeah. And as you said, is, you know, the social aspect. This is what's really crushing people, and this gets back to almost like what Christopher was talking about too. This is health. This is mental health. Every developed society, even non-developed society on the planet, it's our human nature. We gather to eat. We meet our neighbors. We meet our friends. We chat with each other. We socialize. It's good for us. It's healthy for us. And to withhold that from us for this long is harming us. It's causing harm that, again, we're not talking about. We're not measuring. When we just shut these places down on a whim, we're not looking at the damage perhaps that it's causing, not just to the staff, not just the owners, but people who need to get out. It's our mental health, and mental health is real. It's funny, they talked so much about mental health prior to the pandemic. You know, we were getting there. We were realizing how important it is, because the mental health affects your physical health. Mental health leads, if it's untreated with challenges, can lead to addiction. It can lead to suicides. It can lead to depression.
Which we've seen.
And one of the healthiest things we can do is to get out and just be with other people and to work out and get physical. So now into a business, I'm going to move on to Tennille here, because what grasped me with that, and there's so many businesses again being impacted right now. But Tennille's is a little different as well. I mean, there's just hundreds of types of businesses that are just getting impacted by these restrictions and lockdowns all around. So I believe you run a pet hotel, Tennille?
Yes.
And so the restrictions have impacted your trade as well directly.
Yes, in a much bigger way than I think people think about, because if you're not going on holidays, then you're not boarding your pets. If you're not going to sports tournaments, like children's sports tournaments, then we don't get their pets for those weekends. When people go on any kind of holiday sports tournament, even recently when you couldn't even go to someone else's home. So a lot of our customers have family that are in the surrounding areas, and they'll board their dog here when they go and visit their mother or their father in a nursing home. So we haven't had basically next to no business. It's been just people that work up north primarily, and we don't have curbside anything to offer. We don't have takeout. We don't have outdoor, because the only product we sell is a service. So it's really impacted us in a big way. I've been hearing stories, and I do know of other kennels that have closed in Saskatchewan because they just couldn't make it a whole year with. My revenue has dropped by 90%. And so, yes, I'd rather be working than on CERB. There's no doubt about that. And so I don't know. I'm really struggling to understand why the people who are the most afraid of this can't stay home and be safe while the rest of us go about our business, because I don't know how my running a pet hotel is going to affect them or kill their grandma, because I'm sure not going to go and visit their grandma in the nursing home. And if they're not well, they probably shouldn't have ever gone to visit grandma in the nursing home when you're sick. It's just, I am glad though that we have better shopping infrastructure now for people that are immune compromised. That was something I hadn't thought about. Anybody who has any kind of autoimmune disease or is on chemotherapy. So, there has been some benefits in that respect, but what a shame that we had to resort to this type of crisis reaction in order to implement these things. It's been very hurtful. And in our community, when I've had friends that have lost their jobs and now they're getting an eviction notice, I've been able to give them part-time employment to help them through until such time as they get back on their feet and they get another job. My business isn't big enough that I can hire people full-time, but I've been able to help people out in those kind of interim hardships. I've also given to organizations like Salvation Army, the local Chabad, the Shir Hadash, the SPCA, in addition to the Indian and Métis Center, several adoption centers for pets. This year, I haven't been able to give, or last year, anything. In fact, now I'm the one that needs the charity. It's very difficult to go from being completely independent to helpless and very dependent on the government. And throughout this, talk about mental health. Because of the financial strain and the emotional strain, I did end up in emergency this summer. And I have to say, unlike a lot of other people, I wasn't afraid to go to emergency because of COVID. I went because I have gastrointestinal problems. And of course, as soon as I get upset, then it acts up. So I ended up in emergency. And I have to tell you, it was like a ghost town in there. And it was almost horrifying. I was the only person that was checking in at the time. And, there were two nurses there, and they were doing the best they could based on the information that they were given, the policies, procedures. But it was almost frightening to have them bark at me to stand on this spot. It wasn't just a request. And I was the only person in there. So it was actually quite horrifying emotionally. But, we got past that. They had their procedure set up, and it went well. As far as that goes, they treated me. I left. I felt better. But throughout all of this, I've had to literally withdraw half of my retirement savings to make it through this. And I'm 63. I don't know how I'm going to make that money back at this point in life.
No, and it's almost, I'll put it to be blunt, it's terrifying when you look at it. And we got thousands and thousands and thousands of small business owners. These aren't people with guaranteed pensions and things such as, a tweet I put out the other day that had 12,000 likes, a new record for me. When I pointed out that every single person who voted and decided on increased restrictions in government had a guaranteed income. They aren't thinking about all of us who do not. And we don't have guaranteed pensions. These businesses are our investment. This is our future. This is our hope. We've put everything into it. The CFIB, I believe, put out a thing talking about your average small business has gone more than 6 figures into debt just in this year. This is crushing. They can't just crawl out of this. You don't come from a dead start. And we are going to, even when the restrictions finally end, we're going to lose a lot of businesses, because what's going to come at the end of the restrictions? A lot of the aid programs for businesses are going to come to an end. And that's what a lot of them have been hanging by a thread with. And unless we get a sudden, strong turnaround, and it just, we haven't seen the impacts of these restrictions. And what I appreciate, Tennille, of you is, it's a business, again, that people don't think about. You weren't directly locked down. There's no restriction on it. But because of the restrictions on everything else, it moves down and it has impacted you. And again, there's so many other enterprises, businesses, individuals we just don't think of, and it is happening. And we need to let people know. When you choose to bring in these restrictions like this, there's going to be an impact somewhere else. But I'll bring Christopher on, to answer though something that Tennille had brought up. Something that gets forgotten as well, and when I mentioned the Great Barrington Declaration and things like that, is we should be isolating the vulnerable. I mean, it really is there. In your case, you would be a person, I imagine, who it could be terribly dangerous if you got infected with COVID-19 right now. I mean, you're still recovering from a heart episode. You're vulnerable. I mean, we don't want somebody to come around, start coughing on you, or even give you a conventional flu at this time as you recover. And there's a lot of people who are immunocompromised and in different conditions, and we should have always been focusing on them. But we keep coming back to this, let's lock up the healthy to try and save the vulnerable. What are your thoughts on that? I know it doesn't feel like I want to pick on and lock up the vulnerable, but they are important people, of course.
Yeah, and that's kind of been something I've been frustrated with, because we look at, we've been told, you got to do, listen to the science, listen to the politicians and the professionals, and they're telling us we got to do this and we got to do that, and yet they're not protecting the vulnerable. We have an example of what they want. Okay, if you were to do like a scientific experiment and have a control group where everything was how they want it, everybody's obeying all the rules, everybody's being completely under the government's thumb, and that is long-term care facilities. And yet that's where 95% of Canadian COVID deaths have happened. So it makes you question, do these people really know what they're talking about? Are they able to implement these rules effectively? Are they protecting the vulnerable? And why are the people who are healthy being locked down in a way that's unprecedented through the rest of history? We've never locked down healthy asymptomatic people before, and it was never policy before this in past things. If you remember, I don't know how old you have to be to remember the SARS thing, but I mean, we weren't, it was wash your hands, cover your cough, and and if you have symptoms, then go deal with the extra measures. But the rest of us were just able to live our life, and to watch as the people who are actually vulnerable are the most affected, and yet under all the rules and scrutiny of the government that they're telling us the rest of us need, it's hard to swallow. And it makes you question a lot of things, and in particular their information that they're giving you and their reasoning for these extreme lockdowns. And that's especially disheartening when you're watching all of these great local businesses fall. Every time we go out, we drive around, you see another sign closed or boarded up or whatever. And it's these great little businesses that make the community, where they know you and you know them. And, you're left with these big box stores that somehow, again, talking about ineffectiveness and weird implementation of the rules, these little businesses have been shut down and until they go out of business, but I can go in the big box store the whole time. So, who's deciding this and why?
Yeah, and there's absurdities. I mean, we saw that in Ontario. We see in other areas. I think Manitoba did a bit of that where, we could open the big box store, but we see we're being smart. We're keeping people home. We're going to tape off all the stuff we determined you don't need. And that way you won't shop. Well, you're still going to go to get your food. You're still going to go to get your toilet paper. So you're still there. So taping off the underwear section isn't going to stop you from going out. It's just, again, more arbitrary idiocy. It's not, doesn't appear to be doing anything to actually protect anybody. That's the main thing. Where are we actually protecting people? And I'll get back to Charlotte here because, restaurants, I think it's just because it's visible, because people can see it. It's where people see each other coming together. They've always been sort of targeted on this whole thing. But restaurants, because of that, have been very responsible for the most part. They are separating people. They have sanitation at the front. They're masking them when strangers are coming together. And again, we've seen breakouts from the odd restaurant, but immediately the restaurant responds by contact tracing and shutting it down. For the most part, this isn't where the heart of the infections are coming from.
Yeah, it's very I don't know where are these infections coming from is the question. It's the long-term care facilities, right? Like this is where, well, not coming from, I don't know where they come from, but where the problem tends to be. But I do wanted to mention, with a dine-in setting, the people that are afraid, the people that are immunocompromised, the people that are in a position where if they did get COVID, it would be very, very dangerous for them. Those people aren't going out to eat. Let me stress that we still have very much takeout. So it's again goes like, so we're locking down people that are healthy, that have every reason to go out and eat. They don't have to be locked down. So we're locking down healthy to protect the people that are already staying home. So it just goes that people shockingly can make judgments for themselves that suit themselves. So the thing is, what we're dealing with is that people are making judgments for themselves, as well as people being locked down against their will. So all we're really doing to I guess give you my opinion on are we really lowering the case count and stuff, like I don't know if that's the case, because nothing's really changing other than people being forced to do things that go completely against what's beneficial to them. It just makes absolutely no sense. None of it is sensical. I did have another thought, but I've lost it going off of what Christopher said. Yeah, so it like we still have so much takeout, but the people that come in, they want to be out, they're not concerned about that. They want to talk to people. So we're keeping people situated where like the bottom line is we have to make our own judgments. For the government to fine you, to threaten you, to take away your livelihood, to put you in this position and condescending you to a point where you can't make those judgments for yourself. Nobody knows your situation more than you. As far as the government's looking at these case numbers and looking at where these are coming from, we're all numbers to them. They don't realize that these are people, these are businesses, these are jobs, these are families, that we're just numbers to them. We've lost, the whole system is a system. It's not people anymore. It's become too large. It's just, the whole thing is just an absolute fiasco.
Yeah, well, and people put the negative onus on others when we talk about restrictions and lockdowns. I don't know if people have seen it before. There's a great little Simpsons clip. There's a million great little Simpsons clips.
Yeah.
But there's one with Lisa Simpson, and she's talking to Homer with an analogy about this, trying to explain to him about causation and actions. And she says, "This rock, Homer, this rock repels tigers." "Really? Well, how does it do so?" "Well, look around. Do you see any tigers?" "Oh, sell me the rock."
Yeah.
The thing is, so as soon as infections go down or anything like that, as soon as we see positive numbers, they keep coming out and saying, "Well, that's because of the lockdown. So we can't stop restrictions because those numbers are coming down." Well, can you prove those numbers are coming down?
Yeah.
Shut up and stay locked down.
Yeah.
That's not good enough. And again, we are seeing jurisdictions putting lie to that. They said the numbers would go up in Texas. They said they go up in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. They said they go up in Florida. They haven't. California, New York, areas where they've kept the restrictions. Quebec and Canada, some of the strongest restrictions around. and the infections are at their worst. So what's going on, guys? We should see some very direct correlation if these restrictions are effective, and they don't seem to be. We're not talking about taking vulnerable people and throwing them into the infected, but we've got to start looking at how much impact these restrictions are even having on the infection spread.
Yes.
So another aspect of something humans like doing, you know, is aside from gathering, is traveling, and that's where Tennille's been harmed with her business and trying to get going because people aren't getting out. Hotels too, we can't forget that. I mean, they are getting crushed right now. People just aren't on the move. And again, that has a consequence, right? Like, people want to get out. They got to stretch their legs a bit. They need to move around, and they can do so safely, but it's not happening. And you got to look downstream to all the people harmed who serve it, even including dog boarding. But what would you suggest, Tennille, you know, to help keep things rolling for smaller business such as your own?
Well, for businesses like mine, some of my customers have realized the dilemma that this has caused financially. And I have a few customers, I have a handful of them that if they're working a midnight shift on a weekend, they'll board their dog just because it's inconvenient to look after the dog when they're working night shift. And they know that this business is hurting. They know that. And some of those customers really do want to make sure that my kennel, my pet hotel, is still here when we come out the other side of this. And so I do have some customers that are very thoughtful and trying to keep things open. And, you know, if people even just, I don't know, were painting their house or cleaning up their yard, if they even brought their pets to their pet hotel for the weekend, and they did this periodically, even if they didn't need to use us. And that's the problem. If they don't need us, most people don't use us and they don't think about it. But I have had some people, when they call, will say, "Oh, are you still open?" So, you know, that obviously they are thinking about that, but they aren't thinking about most of them aren't thinking about what they could do to support the industry, even if it's just people boarding their pets every, you know, like not every weekend, but if different customers of mine boarded every weekend, I could have the place full on the weekends just for 2 days. It would still help. It would help a lot more than people realize, because right now my business partner, it's a family-run operation, and so it's my adult son. He's only working 10 hours a week, and I'm working. Well, right now I work 84 hours a week now, but when we were busy, I was working 112 hours a week. Now the business is only open 49 hours a week, but I have a lot of work to do outside of business hours. You know, when the customers aren't walking through the door, there's a lot of cleanup. There's baths to do for dogs and you know, nails, even just lots of cleaning and lots of maintenance in this particular industry. But yeah, if they just supported us, even just for a couple of days here, a couple of days there, I mean, it was nice when we had people going on holidays for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, but even a couple of days a week would have made a big difference. But most people just aren't thinking about that. It's, if they don't need it, they don't use it. And you know, I think it is true. If you don't use it, you lose it. There's been places that have already shut down because you just can't afford to survive on fresh air and scenery. It doesn't pay the bills, you know. So yeah, if people just boarded their pets on the weekend, even if they don't need these places, just to help keep us open so that we can pay some of the basic bills. I've been working for the whole year for free, because that's what it's taking for me to keep my place open, so that my son and, like I say, business partner can take what little we're earning, because he has a family of 6. So, you know, that's important. I had savings, so I still do, but I was able to draw on some of that. But my son is young. He hasn't established that kind of a financial stronghold yet in life. He's just not old enough to have put away all that money. But yeah, if people just used us on weekends, that would be enough to keep most places open until we come out the other side of this. And I don't know who decided that my job isn't essential, because it sure is for me.
Yeah, well, I've said something of the sort before. The people who talk about, you know, some businesses that are or aren't essential, those businesses are essential to every person who works within them and owns them. You know, don't dismiss the interest and necessity of those businesses. And it brings a thought that I think almost everybody should do as a mental exercise is, if all of the restrictions were lifted tomorrow and you're going to get back to doing all the things you've been putting off for the last year for whatever reasons and everything else, think of all the businesses and services that you're going to use. Are they still there? And will they still be there in a month or two? Maybe sit and think about that for a little bit, because some of them are hanging by a thread right now and you hadn't thought of them for the last year. And I can't blame people. I mean, they've been restricted, they've been locked down, but think about it for a minute, because that's part of what I want to get on this show today, is think about the other aspects that just didn't cross our minds. I'm not blaming people for not thinking of it. We can only think of so many things, but a lot of suffering and consequences are happening that we just haven't been considering. So I'll go around one more time with everybody here. I'll get back to Christopher. And thanks for that comment over there. Yes, it was the correlation does not equate causation thing I was stumbling on the words for, which is an important one. Something we're hearing a lot about, and it ties into kind of where you're at too, with the mental health and the physical health. Gyms, of course, have been as bad as with restaurants, shut down, locked down, restricted. Those are other areas where people, as you said, in a small household, limited budget, if you want a variety of areas to work on your physical health, and again, a good workout, you feel better afterwards. You know, it's good for your mental health and the works. So, I mean, health facilities, you feel they could be done in a safe manner and open in such a way?
Sure. I mean, you know, I think, like you said, we've kind of amplified the panic, and in a lot of cases unnecessarily. And you know, these businesses have done some of them have done an excellent job of making the places safe, and it's just that there's no one saying, okay, let's take these on an individual basis and think about, you know, who it affects and can it be done safely. They're just doing these blanket edicts. And honestly, a lot of times it's just, I don't know if it's government laziness or power hunger, but that may be a combination of both. But it's easier for them to just say, you know, I think you're just, everybody's shut and we can't, you know, exceptions are too much work and whatever. But I think, you know, by not doing that, we're in the situation we're here to discuss today, where you have a lot of things falling through the cracks. In my case, to give an example, without the availability of the rehab center and the equipment there, the only option I've had is to walk. And so I was very lucky in that December was a very mild winter month, and I was able to walk through December. But we got into that cold spell in January, and I literally can't go out in some of the lower temperatures. You know, it'll cause me to have a heart attack. When it's so cold, it can, you know, it causes a problem anyway. And we were in the, you know, minus 20 was the warm days in that stretch we had there. We were down as far as minus 40, I think, at one day. And I there's nothing I could do for 3-4 weeks, really, safely. And that's the time I would have really been able to use, you know, a workout facility or, you know, whatever. And even a pool. It's like, you know, closed pools. I mean, a pool is literally a big bucket of chlorine, you know, the best antiseptic there is. And yet you can't go in the pool. You know, you can make the entry and exit areas safe. You can have, you know, whatever places for people to take a mask as they get out of the pool or whatever. I mean, you know, we got smart people out there, put them to work, solve that problem, and get the pools going, get something going. And you know, we're killing people. And in the case, and I'm not going to say myself, but people in this situation like me, who aren't able to do, you know, medical appointments or their rehab or whatever it is, I guarantee there are literally people dying because of these restrictions, and I could be one of them. And that's what occurred to me even before you posted about this. But you know, when you were asking about people who are affected by this, I thought, yeah, I mean, this could, in theory, literally kill me or cause me to die X years younger than I would have if I'd had this. And you know, that's awful. I mean, I think about my wife, you know, and what that would do to her. And it's hard.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and then we've become so hyper focused on one aspect of trying to stop preventable deaths. Absolutely fine, and with COVID, but we're forgetting that the efforts to do it are causing, again, not potentially causing, they are causing other preventable deaths, and we aren't talking about those. We aren't looking at those. Again, let's look at that cost benefit, and it's being missed, and it's put people like you at risk. I really appreciate you coming out to speak of it, though, because there's so many, every person, every family, every individual has a different circumstance. Some people are getting through this just fine. Some people are fine living in isolation. Some people are lucky enough to have been healthy enough that it doesn't matter, or they have a home gym. But those are a minority. I mean, these restrictions are impacting everybody, and in all sorts of ways that we're not hearing about, we're not talking about. And I just can't express enough appreciation that you came on to share that with us today, because it's personal. I mean, this is your health you're talking about, but I want it to be personal. I want people to see a face. These are real people, I mean, I know as the occasional UCP MLA still talk to me. They watch this stuff. These are the people that get impacted when you've done your Zoom meeting and you've decided to bring in further restrictions. They're really there. And it really does things to them, and it really can kill them, even if inadvertently. I mean, an inadvertent death is just as dead as one that's on purpose. So let's look at the whole picture here. So I'll move on. And is there anything else you'd like to say before I move on to Charlotte here?
Just quickly, you talked about cost-benefit analysis. And one thing that I see that doesn't seem to be considered in that is the vast majority of the COVID deaths, and I've been looking at the government's own statistics because I don't have anything else to do these days but sit around and be the number crunching geek that I am, is most of these deaths, the vast majority have 2, 3 or more comorbidities. So, it's easy to sort out who needs protected and who doesn't. And, we're not doing it, and we're not doing it to the cost of the general population. And I really feel like we're doing more harm than good.
Yes, absolutely.
And for doing this and for getting the word out that it is affecting ordinary people in ways we didn't take into account.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's, in pointing out those comorbidities, in a sense, we've been fortunate, if you would want to call it that. If we're going to have a pandemic, this one seems to really almost exclusively focus on the people who are already kind of got one foot out the door. I'm not trying to be cold about it, but that's the reality. And I'll give a bit of an analogy, though. Like, I used to work a lot internationally and I'd work in the eastern states. And I got a thing for cemeteries. I always love them. I just like walking around them. They're peaceful. I tour them. I read the stones. My wife, Jane's the same way. We had our wedding pictures taken in one. Call it morbid or whatever you like. But what they are is they're pieces of history. And what I would see in the eastern states, which was very big in the older areas, are family plots. And you would find whole zones, though, of 1917, 1918, of entire families wiped out. You would see over the course of 4 months, all of these children and younger people. The Spanish flu, because people compare that to this today, there was nothing like this. It killed everybody. In fact, if you look it up and you want to look that up, it killed the young and actually spared quite a few of the older people. Totally different than what we've got going on right now. And if you're going to choose something that's going to sweep through, I would kind of rather it was going to hit those who are, we want to protect those vulnerable, but it's not wiping out children and the people who have decades and decades ahead of them. And, to add a little more quickly, I've got a grandmother who's 101 years old. She's in a care center in Calgary, doing great. She's pretty close to deaf and blind, but her mind's all there. But her final year, or I don't know if it's her final year, but I doubt she's got a decade left in her. Hopefully she does. But she's been in isolation. She can meet with my father and a couple of other individuals. She can't do Zoom meetings. She's not going to do email. And she would take the chance, to let the great-grandchildren and the grandchildren in face-to-face just one more time. Is this really saving her? Is this doing her a favor? Is this making her life better that she's spending the last year or years of it as a virtual prisoner? And how many thousands of other seniors are in that same situation? And again, it's not saying we want to irresponsibly expose them to the virus, but we've got to look at the whole picture and the damage that's being done with these restrictions. And these seniors are suffering. And as well, so Charlotte, they can't come out to eat or dine these days either, which was another aspect. A lot of I know working in the service industry, to get those regular seniors who would come in and sip a coffee for 4 hours and tip 30 cents, they'd be frustrating, but they were very regular customers, and the social aspect was really important to them.
Yes, absolutely. It's a lot easier for me to talk about financial strains. Obviously financial strains are extremely difficult and are very dangerous to my way of life, but the part that really keeps me up at night is the absolute imprisonment of seniors, and actually most of all in my case, I have a 2-year-old son, and the absolute lack of social settings that he is able to play with other children is heartbreaking for me. He's 2 years old. He's not in school. If he could go to school, he doesn't have groups of friends. One huge thing over the winter season that was really hard for us was the lack of play gyms for him. I worry about his social development. Just talking to me and his dad all day long. He doesn't have any siblings yet. Hopefully in the future, one day he will. I don't want him, and for us, we don't put a mask on our child at all. So, but I know there's children at school that are forced to, and they can't smile at each other. They can't speak to each other. They can't be children, basically. And that is very, 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 very alarming for me, because anything that happens to you before the age of 5 will stick with you forever if it's traumatic, and of course after that as well, but it will stick in your subconscious, and it's going to be a problem depending on how long this goes on for. And going off of what you said with seniors, did anybody ask any seniors, do you want to lock down and destroy the lives of those young to give you another 2 or 3 years if you're in old age and you're on, like you said, you already have your foot out the door? Obviously it's horrible. I'm not going to say these lives are more important than those. I have grandparents too. Trust me, it's horrible. This isn't a conversation I want to be having. But did anybody ask these seniors? When I go to co-op in a small town in Alberta, before the mask mandates were threatened with fines on people, you know what? The seniors there were not wearing masks. They were smiling at me. They're walking right by me. Nobody asked them. No senior would say, yeah, lock up all my kids and all my grandkids to keep me safe. This is a narrative that we're being told that is actually not true. It's you can say, you can look at the facts, you can look at the headlines, you can read the stories all day long. All you have to do is open your eyes and talk to people and be aware of your surroundings. I feel like critical thinking has been completely lost. The damages, like Christopher and Janelle have said, stemming from this, what do they call them? The secondary damages. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words most of the time, but it's just, yeah, the secondary damages will just long many years outweigh what we're trying to improve. And I honestly, I'm at a point where I honestly don't know if these measures are actually trying to help people, because the damages coming from them are just so, from what I can see, outweighing what they're trying to fix. I'm just confused. I'm eternally and endlessly confused at these measures.
Yeah, and another consequence, and something Chris mentioned earlier. I mean, they're dehumanizing us, and the masks, as he put in private chat, they've stolen our smiles, and he mentioned somebody else we don't think about are deaf people, and a lot of them. I'm deaf in 1 year. It's been very hard on lip reading. You can't lip read when a person has a mask on. It's impossible. Yes. So these are, masks have impacts more than people imagine. And imagine living in the world of being somebody who's deaf. Your main means of communications with others was lip reading. Now you can't do that. I guess you're handing them a pad and paper with a sterilized pen or something. I don't know what you have to do to keep that communication going. But again, the consequences just pile up, and the people impacted and things we just don't think of. Half of our communication is our facial expressions, and our mouths are a huge part of that. And we've stolen that from ourselves. We've stolen it from each other, and it is hurting us. It's hurting us all the way along and down the line. So thanks for joining me, Charlotte. I'll move on to Tennille to close up. And I really appreciate the perspective from you today.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm hearing those happy hounds in the background there, Tennille. You know, pets have become, I think, to a lot of people, especially when they have been housebound, more important than ever. That they're fantastic companions and just great fun. My wife and I have fostered and raised bulldogs for a long time now. Those goofy, overbred animals, but sometimes you need that break, and you need to put them up somewhere safe and loving when you go away. And it's just you're another small business that's just taking such a beating out of this whole horrible period. So, is there anything else you'd like to add today?
Well, there's a couple things. One, maybe I'm too vested in my business, but I found that a lot of my emotional well-being hinges on all the four-legged guests that I have here. It's so easy to please them. You scratch their chin and they wag their tails. You can't please people that easily. So I found a lot of my like I said, my emotional well-being really does hinge on boarding the animals. And I like it when my customers say things to me like they couldn't go on a holiday and use another place because they just feel that comfortable with our facility. And it's so nice to know that they can go away and they have that peace of mind. We use a number of different methods for people to contact us, including things like WhatsApp in case, they don't want to pay texting fees, or if they even want to phone or, like message and get like progress reports on their animals, because we want people to have that peace of mind. But the other thing that bothers me, I think that's really a hard pill to swallow, is when, I hear about people like Christopher with his heart problems. And I look at, well, how do they decide that my job's not essential? Because it is for me. But how do they decide what surgeries aren't essential? I mean, we've got elective surgeries. So they've shuttered my business based on all these compromised people, and they've shuttered, how do you stop doing pacemakers? I mean, it's not like people are getting moles removed, for Pete's sake. How is a pacemaker an elective surgery? So these people aren't able to get pacemakers. And I've read a couple of stories where men with young children have died because they didn't get a pacemaker. So they don't get a pacemaker, and they're doing this to my business while not providing medical help for people that need it. I have issues with that. At least if they're going to do this to me, I don't think things like pacemakers should be considered elective. I think that's a pretty essential surgery to have, because it's your heart, for Pete's sake. So that's it. Like I say, it's a tough pill to swallow when they do this to my industry. And then they aren't even providing essential surgeries because they're elective. And I don't know how that is. Like I say, it's not like they're getting moles removed.
No, and as Christopher put in the other comments, colonoscopies, mammograms, things like that. I mean, these are preventative procedures that are getting put off and deferred, which could lead to much bigger things down the road. Also, I mean, we have a health system, which is a much bigger discussion, with the whole system in itself, but that always seems to be on the brink and always seems to be holding back on the ability to provide. I mean, we got some great facilities and great professionals, but we're always rationing care. All of this stuff that's being deferred, when this ends, whenever it bloody well ends, everybody's going to be coming in to get it done. Even deferred vasectomies have to get done at some point. They're going to be coming in. They're going to be pressuring the clinics, the doctors, the hospitals. And trust me, if you put your vasectomy off too long, it's got some other consequences for you potentially that could last you a lifetime as well. Though it could be a good consequence too. I don't want to knock all of those things. But I want to thank you guys all very much. Again, it's just so important to put faces to the people behind there, not those cold clinical news conferences where we see Dr. Hinshaw and the others talking. You're looking at a camera and you're talking on a script. These are people on the other end. This is who you're impacting. These are the impacts. Again, I don't think necessarily everybody in government and every bureaucrat's evil or that they, intend harm, but they, I think, often lose touch and forget about what the consequences of what their actions are. And we have a government with actions that are dominated by health professionals like Hinshaw and so on. I think somebody else said before, if it was all dominated by economists, they would let the Black Plague go through the place as long as it didn't cost anything in the economy, because that's what they're focused on. So we've got to have some balance. We've got to look at the whole picture. And so far we haven't. So thank you all again. Hopefully all this nightmare ends for all of us soon, but I really appreciate this coming on today. It was a great chat, and perhaps we'll talk again down the road on some other issues here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cory.
Right. Yes, thank you. This was great.
Okay, so I'm going to move on now onto some purely political things. Jeremy Farkas, I interviewed him last week, actually, on Friday. It's difficult, he's running for mayor, he's working in city council, so I couldn't get him on live as much as I'd like to. Mondays are very busy for city councilors. As I said, Mayor Naheed Nenshi has announced he's not going to be running for re-election, so it's a wide open field. It's going to be a very competitive race. Jody Gondek has entered the race. She's just another version of Naheed Nenshi, and he's quite happy to endorse her and hope that he hasn't formally endorsed her, but rest assured that's his chosen replacement. So I think that's where the real municipal battleground and visions we're going to see is going to be between Jeremy and Gondek, though there are a number of other entrants, and we'll be covering that as we lead closer to the end in the municipal race. Difficult to campaign when in lockdowns and such too. The old conventional means of door knocking are not available to you. So I will play that recording, and I haven't done this before on this broadcasting software. I think it's on my end, but it seems like the sound comes in perfectly, but the picture might not be the greatest. We'll see how this goes, but you can hear everything Jeremy said, and it's a great 40 minutes of how his campaign's going. And of course, the live chat's still going to be going. I'll be here and we can converse, and we can hear what Jeremy's been up to. He was the first out of the gate in the election, and the campaign's been going well so far, but it's a long road yet. So let me fire up this video file and get it rolling. All right, thank you very much for joining me, Jeremy. I know it's a very busy time for you with city council, with your campaign, or just like the rest of Calgarians, just trying to live through these crazy pandemic restricted, politically volatile times. So I guess I'll just start with the easy stuff for you. How's the campaigning been going for you so far?
Well, I just want to say thanks, Cory. When we announced back in September, it feels like a year ago, but when we announced, you were the first guy who reached out for an interview. So really appreciated the podcast and the chance to be able to weigh in there. But it's been going great. We have a tremendous team of volunteers who are out there knocking on doors, delivering lawn signs, dropping off flyers. When you get started, you never know to what extent is it going to snowball. But I think Calgarians out there right now, they're desperate for a change. They're really hungry to see Calgary City Council move in a much more financially responsible direction. They're looking for change at the top, change in leadership, change in tone, and not taking anything for granted. But I'd say the campaign's going good so far, but still a lot of Calgarians struggling out there. The economy is in very poor shape, but I think that we have what it takes to be able to turn this ship around and hopefully bring back Calgary bigger and better than ever.
Very well, and you began this. I mean, you've been campaigning for quite some time. You were the first out of the gate. You didn't do it under the presumption that the mayor may or may not run again in the next election. That's changed. Mayor Nenshi has formally announced that he won't be running. So that is going to change your field, though, I imagine. I mean, the reality is incumbents are terribly difficult to campaign against in municipal politics. So that didn't dissuade you. You were going to run, incumbent or no, but now a number of other names, I suspect, you're suddenly going to spring into the mix, which is great. That's democracy. That's the way it goes. But it can also dilute the messaging or such. So, what can you put out to show that you're standing out when we start looking at a ballot with 12 people on it? Like, what are your key points should you become mayor?
Well, first up, I want to thank Mayor Nenshi for his service. He's served us through good and bad times over the past 10 or 11 years, and definitely thank him for his service. But I think now is the time for change. I think Calgarians, as I mentioned, they're looking for a different direction. They're wanting to see a focus on financial responsibility, on getting Calgarians back to work, and much less secrecy at City Hall. So I think now is our opportunity, looking forward, to be able to really chart a better direction for the city. So while I think the mayor, I think that now is the time that we look to the future. For my part, though, and running for mayor, I knew that I had to be in it for the right reasons. I knew that I had to give Calgarians something to vote for rather than against. So for me, it was never about reading the political tea leaves or being opportunistic or seeing what would be best for me. The way that the rules work, you can't run for both councillor and mayor. It's pretty much loser leaves town. So I knew that if I was in, I was going to be all in, regardless of what the incumbent chose to do. So I think that there's going to be a lot of people out there. Obviously, it's a free country. Anybody can run. But I think that the choice ahead of us is between that same old, tired status quo, that establishment thinking that's got us into this mess that we're in now, or we can chart a new path forward and try to embrace, again, financial responsibility and transparency. And I know for my part, I'm just hoping to give Calgarians something to vote for rather than against, and hopefully some very needed change. And then lastly, with 6 or 7 new faces around the table, many incumbents not running again, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be able to actually chart a new course. And I think change is on the ballot, and it's going to be up to Calgarians to decide where we go from there.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a very large turnover and renewal, no matter who wins which seats on council, with a number of people stepping aside. Something that's been frustrating for Calgarians in general for the last quite some years now, it's been such a volatile council and chamber in general. One of the biggest roles as mayor is holding it together. It's keeping the cooperation. It's, council members don't all have to agree, but it's just keeping order and being productive and things like that. And it's really been short on that front. And a lot of it, has been with you fighting with them quite often, because you're putting forward things outside of the status quo. I mean, I understand why they're getting upset, but there's going to be a number of people on council, of course, presuming you won as mayor, that still wouldn't necessarily be moving in the same direction as you. How could you ease that pressure or make a more cooperative environment in Calgary City Council, so we don't always tune in to see the live feed and see a crazed gong show?
And part of it is the dearth of traditional media, and thanks for the incredible coverage that your outlet is doing. The media tends to only cover us when there's fights or big disagreements, and they don't actually do a good job of demonstrating when we are working together. I know for my part, when I wake up, I'm not smarting for a fight, but there's certain things that my constituents elected me on in terms of financial responsibility, controlling our budget, keeping taxes reasonable, that I know that I need to do what it takes to stand up for them. And I do have a proven record of being able to work with other councillors to be able to get things done, say, working with Councillor Farrell to ensure that Calgarians had a voice at the table with the Olympic debate, working even with the mayor to be able to restore the summer student program at the city as a way to save costs as well as to offer opportunity for young people. There's a lot of things that we do behind the scenes working together, but when it comes to those big picture pieces like keeping Calgarians at work, controlling our costs, these are things that I'm going to advocate strongly for. And even say last year during the first COVID lockdown, it was a 7.5% increase that council voted on. And you know what? I had to speak my conscience. I could not support a 7.5% increase while businesses were being forced to close, while Calgarians were unemployed. I thought that it was just so disconnected from reality. So while I want to work together on the issues where there are common grounds, I want to make sure that Calgarians know that they have somebody standing up for them in terms of, again, that financial responsibility piece. And with a new council and potentially a majority new faces around the table, this just never happens in Calgary politics. I think it's a once in a generation opportunity where hopefully we do have other like-minded councillors who are elected based on those financial responsibility and transparency based platforms that we can set a new direction and have a much better alignment going forward.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to a bit of an issue that's more self-interested of me. I live actually just outside of the city in Pritis, so a short distance from city boundary. But being that close, I mean, I work in the city. We most of Pritis does, and in those bedroom communities, we're very integrated. Have a lot of common issues, and now a role of mayor is as an ambassador almost of the city to other levels of government or other areas. Mm-hmm. We've got a big clash really warming up in Foothills right now with the regional plan going on and the panel that's been set up, which is set up in such a way that, well, the higher populations will dominate the lower populations. And we feel we could be seeing some of the city regulations and density standards being imposed on neighboring municipalities. We're very concerned about it. And it's also leading to some hostility and issues. How would you approach dealing with neighboring? I mean, you're going to grow. You have to try to plan and be in communication with neighboring counties and MDs and such. But at the same time, if you start trying to bully them, that they're going to get really crabby.
Yeah, and when I think of, say, Edmonton, obviously you can't learn everything from them in terms of what they do, let alone hockey teams. But in Edmonton, they have a great relationship with their local municipalities. And when it comes to economic development, really they hunt as a pack. And they try to make sure that what they do ensures that everybody is better ahead, whether it's Sherwood Park, Spruce Grove, Edmonton proper, and so on. Whereas at the city of Calgary, it seems like given our high costs, high taxes, massive amount of regulations and red tape, we're seeing a lot of the investment go to, say, Balzac, go to the Tsuut'ina Nation and so on. And the approach, unfortunately, with this council has been kind of thinking in what ways can we kneecap our competitors? How can we stop them from developing rather than looking inward and getting our own house in order? So I happen to think that we need to collaborate much better with our regional partners. We can't be
plan for what people want, or are you trying to pigeonhole people into what you would want? And I think that's where a lot of the battle comes. And right now the city is out of balance. I mean, the downtown is turning into a ghost town. People are pushing outwards, and there's a trend of it that seems to be accelerating. I mean, there's that crazed real estate thing happening. Single family dwellings are being snapped up on the market like hotcakes, while the downtown again is getting emptier, which it bodes poorly for all of us. I mean, nobody wants to live in a city that's a donut. But that guidebook for communities, I don't think perhaps might be what was required as a planning document. How can the city look ahead and plan better? And what can or should be done with that guidebook?
Yeah, so not a lot of people know about this, but the city is pushing ahead with this pretty revolutionary new planning document called the Guidebook, and it It's a legally binding plan that seeks to reform existing communities and to basically change them to a new vision for how the city should grow. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more of that top-driven social engineering approach, where it's a high-density and anti-automobile kind of lifestyle that the city hall planners or the politicians have essentially decided for you. And I happen to think that choice is good. Not everyone wants to live in a high density neighborhood, and that's okay. Some people, say younger urban professionals, like the hustle and bustle of the downtown, and they want to live close to amenities. But say some are younger families who would like a single family home and some room for their kids to be able to play and grow. I think that's fine too. But the problem is when you have city hall bureaucrats or politicians dictating to you how you should live your life. And this guidebook, I think, swings the pendulum much farther in one direction than it should. It's telling people how they should live their lives and how they will live their lives, rather than actually listening to them and to meet that demand. And as we're looking to the market, single-family homes aren't going out of business anytime soon. If anything, it's super hot right now. And that's a type of lifestyle that many Calgarians, if not all, still appreciate and enjoy for themselves. So I think this guidebook, it really misses the mark, and it's frankly disingenuous for council to be trying to ram it through at a time when Calgarians are distracted with the pandemic. They're focused on making it through the day, focused on their health and their families. And the last piece is I did support Councillor Chu's push to have this discussed after the election, so the candidates can go out there, they can canvass, they can ask Calgarians, hey, what are you looking for in your neighborhood? How do you want your community to change and grow? And once the candidates have actually listened and campaigned on their views, then they would have a mandate. But I don't find it legitimate to have a council with potentially a majority of them not running again, wanting to get this done in just the last few months before the election. It's very disingenuous.
Yeah, well, the ultimate consultation with the citizens is a general election, but we only get one of those every 4 years. So when it comes to something this large, yeah, I can't think of a better time to put it forward than that. This is when the whole city's engaged. This is when everybody gets a chance and a voice. Consultation, that's been a loaded word, again, particularly in the last 10 years. I've seen it personally. I feel it's been more of a tool to get the way you want rather than an exercise to actually find out what the citizens want. I've seen stacked consultation meetings where they're trying to push you to an outcome rather than try to work collaboratively, at least towards one. I mean, there might be challenges that citizens don't understand with development. It's a good time to collaborate and talk and say, well, yes, I know this is what you'd like, but the city's changing.
It's sort of like the city's asking you, what kind of pizza do you want? And if you don't want a pizza, they say, well, we still asked you what kind of pizza you wanted, so you're being consulted. But it seems often there's a bit of a predetermined outcome that they're trying to fish for or look for, and it's not a genuine listening. And the tone at the top really matters as well. This is a council that's been very reluctant to allow Calgarians to vote on important issues that impact every single Calgarian. Remember, it was the provincial government that forced the council to conduct a plebiscite on the Olympics. That was not the council's first choice to have Calgarians vote in the matter. Council recently voted against allowing Calgarians to decide through a plebiscite, say the speed limit changes, despite the fact that they're going to punt the fluoride question to a plebiscite. So I guess they're basically saying Calgarians aren't smart enough to figure out speed limits, but you are smart enough to be able to navigate the science of fluoride in the water. So go figure.
My great-grandchildren are going to be participating in fluoridation plebiscites. I mean, that one's just never going to end. I didn't even want to dip into that one. But it just keeps coming and going and coming and going. But I mean, and again, just engaging the citizens. I'm glad it goes to a plebiscite anyways. If it's that much of a flashpoint, then there's no better way than to put it to Calgarians themselves. Another big one, and here's a monster, is the Green Line. This has been in discussion for years and years. Budgets come, go. The scope of it now is incredibly shrunken. Again, I see a little of the disingenuous nature of some things where some folks say, oh, we didn't blow the budget. Oh yeah, well, you cut the project in half. I mean, that's blowing the budget as far as I'm concerned, because you're spending the same amount of money. So it's just another way.
Yeah, if you hire somebody to do renovations under a certain price tag, but they come back and say, okay, we can only do the budget, or rather we can only do the basement, they're still over budget, regardless of how they massage the terms.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, something to be fair for proponents of it too, they could say, look, the reason the budget's getting out of control is because we spent so much darn time dithering over this thing and talking about it and studying it and never actually breaking ground. I mean, price of everything goes up. So all we can do is shrink it. It's in question now, though, whether the province wants to take part in it at all. There are people questioning, especially with the downtown being as empty as it is these days. Is it something you need in the near future? Where are you landing with the Green Line right now?
So I was the only councillor who did not support the current plan, and I still have a lot of concerns around the finances, whether or not we can actually build it for the $5.5 billion price tag. And then the other pieces around the engineering, whether we can actually build it at all, given the number of very serious concerns that members of the community and business leaders have brought forward. There's been a group of folks, Jim Gray, Barry Lester, Brian Fileski, others with very deep experience in executing mega projects like this. And they've highlighted a number of concerns that I think this council needs to take very seriously, so that when we start, so that we don't start something that we can't finish. And it's not that I'm opposed to transit infrastructure. I think that we need to continue to build our city and build for our next million or our next 2 million, but we need to be strategic. So I'd be supportive of, say, LRT extension to the airport. I think that would be really an incredible piece to be able to continue to market Calgary for conferences, for tourism, and unlock value for commuters there. I would also be in support of building the southeast portion from the South Health Campus down to the new arena. We already have the land assembled. We know how to build it, and it would be a fraction of the cost. And that would give us some time to be able to ensure that the downtown portion can actually be built as proposed. But I think that the fact that the province is doing their due diligence, it's only appropriate. I'm not going to hammer them for that, but at the end of the day, they have a duty to taxpayers to make sure that this project, if it's done, is done responsibly. And for them, I hope that they take as much time as that they need in order to make sure that those answers are answered, rather that those questions are answered, and that they have what it takes to make sure that this can get done.
Yeah, well, and cooperation with other levels of government. I mean, the province has saved us from ourselves as far as the city is concerned a couple of times, I guess you could say, particularly with the Olympic file. Credit where due to Rachel Notley said, well, we'll get on board with this. We'll help out. But you know what? We're not going to until we can see for sure that Calgarians want us to go ahead with this. Some people say that's a cowardly approach. No, I thought that was a good democratic one. I've never been a Notley fan, but hey, they get it right sometimes. And when it was put to Calgarians and when there was a month to discuss it and debate it and really drill down into it, they said, no, we don't want to go that way.
Yeah, perhaps it wasn't so much a vote against the Olympics as against council's overspending, council's secrecy. There are a lot of people who are on board with the concept, but just didn't trust this current leadership and this current management to be able to execute. And I think that we're seeing a lot more missed opportunities and missed chances like that with the current leadership, which really underscores the need to be able to elect a much more financially responsible council going forward, so that when opportunities like that do emerge, we can actually execute on them.
Yeah, well, trust is essential. And I think there's a big lack of trust, again, with citizens with government.
Missed opportunities. Provincial government might be willing to work with the municipal government, but otherwise wouldn't because of the personalities that are involved. And there's been some issues that are important to me, like defending our police budget, where I have been actually pleased to see our Casey Madhu, the municipal or the minister in charge of law enforcement, actually saying no, he's not going to entertain municipalities endangering their citizenry. So it might be a case occasionally you have provincial government saving the citizens from themselves, or rather their own leadership. So at the end of the day, I think that we need to be collaborative. We need to focus on that common ground. And my view of an effective mayor would be one who can stand up on the issues and get results, because former Mayor Bronconnier, he was very effective in supporting the provincial government when he thought they were getting it right. He was very effective in opposing them, but he was strategic about making sure that it was for the best deal for Calgarians at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, and since you spoke about, Casey Madu and policing, and I want to tie that in a little more. We'll go further in downtown and dealing with that. Like I've been going down there regularly. I've written on it. I mean, in being hollowed out, something else that's happened is, unfortunately, you can really see more of, and I believe there really are more of people who are addicted, people who are in distress. Crime is bad, and you hear it from others. You see it. It's bold. I mean, vehicle break-ins, property crimes, other incidents. There's general disorder going on. It's difficult for a city council to deal with, in a sense that you're in charge of the policing and you got to run the budget for that, but you can't deal with legislation when it comes to laws and things such as that. So you've got to find that balance. But I mean, it's directly the responsibility of city council, at least with the police aspect of it. What initiatives do you think you could do, or how can this be managed?
Well, it's been a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or a bit of a death spiral downtown. You see massively failed policies from council, things like egregious parking prices, $20 or $30, $40 to be able to park, very confusing infrastructure projects, bike lanes where they don't belong, making it very difficult for local businesses to survive, let alone visitors to commute into the downtown to purchase or enjoy their services. You see other things like budgetary pressures on the police, forcing them to close their downtown police station. We're the only major North American city without a permanent brick and mortar police station. That happened at the same time as the council supported opening of the Beltline drug site. There's a number of different pieces here at play, let alone the egregious tax increases, sometimes 20, 30, 40% year over year on some of these businesses. And it's very clear that council's plan for downtown has not worked. I'd be strongly focusing on that safety and security element. It's really important that businesses feel safe to locate downtown, and that ultimately their staff are willing to locate downtown. A lot of people are speaking to me about just the changes with COVID-19, with work from home arrangements. A lot of employees are asking for the changes to stay after the pandemic, so that some of these businesses are all too happy to oblige if they can narrow down their square footage to maybe a quarter or half of what it was before. They're happy to work with that. So there's not going to be I think the focus on downtown like there used to be. And the last piece is around flood mitigation. Our downtown is still not as secure as it should be for the event of a flood like 2013 or worse. And a lot of businesses, if they're thinking about investing, say in the downtown or near the airport or in Balzac and so on, they're probably going to choose the other options because of the safety and the security elements of our downtown. So at the end of the day, council needs to make sure that they're actually funding these services adequately, that they're focusing on the quality of life in the downtown. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to have that kind of spiral that we're seeing just as recently as last month with the closure of the Eau Claire YMCA. Yeah,
and I mean, the world's changed, and we're not going to see the petrochemical head offices moving in to fill all that empty space. We just got to face it. Hopefully we get a bit of a rebound and some come back, but there's still going to be a tremendous gap to fill down there, and we've got to get more creative and start doing things differently if we're hoping to bring it down. I mean, the ground level businesses, the restaurants, the things. I mean, that's great too. And if we could improve the parking, if we could mitigate the crime issues, I mean, families will feel more inclined to come down there. It's a beautiful downtown. There's the river, the buildings, there's some architecture, there's art. It's great. But then there's been efforts to try, and through the Calgary Economic Development, I mean, we've had a large, I'll call it that, a slush fund to sit and try and subsidize and draw and bring businesses in to fill those gaps. But it seems to be failing dismally. What are your thoughts on dealing with Calgary Economic Development and that fund?
Well, I think one of the greatest things about Calgary is that your success in this town really depends on what you can do rather than who you know. And taxing existing businesses to death, pocketing that money and putting into slush funds to dole out one-time grants or various package to select businesses, it just doesn't make sense. It's not fair, and it actually erodes our competitiveness on an international level when you think about the huge tax increases that Calgary has become known for. Unless you have an in with the people who are deciding the grants or the politicians, you get the same egregious tax rate as anybody else, and it just doesn't instill business confidence. So I believe I was the only councillor to vote against that slush fund approach. If we have these huge surpluses and these reserves, it should be offered back to all taxpayers as tax relief, so that existing businesses can not just survive, but also thrive and grow. So this current approach, it's obviously failed, and government and politicians, we're terrible at picking winners and losers in private business. Frankly, our business should be getting out of the way of business, so that people who want to take a risk in our city can do so, as long as they're able to reap the rewards. So my view for how this should go forward with is reasonable, fair, predictable, and low taxes for everybody, regardless of whether you're a resident or a business owner. You should be able to rely on fair treatment from council rather than necessarily your access to a certain development agency. But we're going to have to make some hard choices to be able to get our budget under control and our taxes under control.
Yeah, well, I remember owning a pub, and my pub, well, you've been to it actually. It was in a bit of a strip mall, and it had some empty spaces. I mean, the best analogy I could put out for how insulting it was to business owners, and is when they do this, is if my landlord said, you know what, I'm going to raise your rent by 30%, and I'm going to cut the rent on the vacant one down from you to half of what it normally is to draw in another restaurant, because I want to develop the area further. So I want you to take a hit on your already marginal business, so I can reach out and try and draw a new one in who's going to compete with you. Like, that's essentially what they've done. I mean, the businesses right now, all they wanted was a break. I mean, the only time in my life I'd seen it was business owners came out, that was it 2 years ago, and actually rallied at City Hall begging to reduce that tax burden that's just crushing them with triple digit tax increases. But getting to that, if you're
plus these businesses are savvy too, right, Cory? They, like any customer, consumer, individual, you may sign up for that free trial, and once the special rate is down, you're going to go somewhere else. You might as well work on retaining your existing customers, which is our existing taxpayers. How do we ensure that they have the predictability and the low taxes to be able to survive, rather than just betting the farm on some magic bullet, somebody outside to come and save us? But that's been the mentality. It's been trying to go all in on Amazon to come and save us, go all in on the Olympics to come and save us, when the solution and when our best asset is existing Calgarians who are here, who believe in our city and are working every day to try to make ends meet. What can we do to be able to serve them? Because they're here already and they want to grow their business. And how do we make that happen?
Yeah, well, a thriving business environment with a favorable climate towards businesses is what would draw others in. I mean, they're going to look around and say, yeah, that's a place I'd like to set up shop. But as you know, yeah, they're not fools. They realize, okay, I'm the shiny new thing that'll get the grant and move in, but they're going to turn their eyes onto the next shiny new thing once I'm established and I'm just in the same boat as the rest of them. So, I mean, we got to look a little bigger. But with as you said, the taxes are high, but that means we've got to cut spending somewhere. Where can the city cut? Where can these efficiencies be found? I mean, we always say it all the time, but it is easier said than done. Where can we reduce spending, especially when we're coming into such tight times for everybody?
Well, it's two pieces to that. The first is on the capital budget, which is the infrastructure, everything that the city builds. We need to make sure we have a rock solid understanding of what it's going to cost to be able to maintain that infrastructure going forward. I remember one of my first days as a councillor, we were given a big sheet and a list of capital projects, bus improvements, things like that. And I asked, where was the second piece of paper? And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, surely we've costed out what it's going to cost in our operating potential to impact every single Calgarian taxpayer, as well as the operating budget going forward. Just flicking the lights on to be able to maintain this new system is going to be a huge tax increase on every single Calgarian just to operate the thing. So we were always talking about one side of the ledger, the capital, without the sense of what it's going to actually cost to keep the lights on. So that's the first piece. And the second piece is around salaries, wages, benefits, and overtime. this is a tricky topic for any politician to touch on, and I can see why most councillors are reluctant. But in recent years, I believe rough numbers from about 2010 when this mayor was elected to today, the salaries, wages, benefits, and overtime, it's gone from about 42% of the city's overall budget to about 55 or 56%, which is a huge increase. We're seeing even just from 2015 that the city pays on a yearly basis more than $200 million per year as a result solely from salary increases, not from service increases, not from other projects or services, but purely from pay raises is $200 million per year. And even during COVID, it was about 30 million per year that was added to the city's budget from pay raises during the pandemic, during the lockdown, when there were huge tax increases, people bleeding jobs, businesses closing. So I would say that one of the biggest pieces has to be holding the line on salaries, making sure that, and as a councillor, I've been willing to lead by example. I turned down the generous golden pension that's available to city councillors. It's not that I'm opposed to retirement benefits, but I think that we need to be taking a look at some of the reforms in the private sector around, say, defined contribution models. So those are probably the two biggest pieces in terms of where the money is going to, ill-advised capital projects and salary increases. We can't afford, say, the 3 or 4% increases that unions have asked for us in the past year. And frankly, it's going to take political courage from our new mayor and our new council to be able to say, given everything that's happening in the economy, taxpayers can't afford it.
Well, and with those important talks coming and those difficult times coming, I'll finish off with asking about something that's been a pet subject of yours and has been a deficit in City Hall, and that's transparency. As you'd labeled it, the Chamber of Secrets, where council on it just seemed to darn near everything will go into hiding. And in my view, there's only a handful of issues. I mean, there's a need for going in camera now and then, but for the most part, I mean, so our last mayoral candidate, who won, campaigned very much on transparency and turned out to be quite the opposite. Can we be assured that you would, I'm pretty confident just with the amount of noise you've made already, but still, what would you do to make sure that we can maintain an eye on city council and what you guys are up to and what you're doing?
I think it's a fair question. And I think I have what no other candidate does in this mayor's race. It's credibility, not just the talk. You actually see my record over the past 3.5 years. And you know how I've advocated on behalf of my constituents, how I've not just talked the talk, but walked the walk in terms of turning down the pension at great personal and political expense, advocating for my constituents every single day, and pushing on serious issues and occasionally actually getting kicked out of city council as a result of it. So more than just talk, you actually see the record. And one of my major commitments was to hold regular town hall meetings where once a month, anybody and everybody could come and meet with me in a community center or something like that, where they can ask me questions directly and I could hold myself accountable. And since being elected, I've conducted upwards of 50 of those meetings, continuing them online and live through Facebook and so on. But I want to go back to one of the reasons I ran for council is I invented this program called the Council Tracker. And it was a simple and easy to use website where anybody could see how their councillor voted on important issues like spending or the police budget or bike lanes, things like that. And you could actually see how much time council spent in these secret meetings. And it's pretty egregious. It's upwards of a quarter or more of council's time spent in these secret meetings. And like you said, it's very specific topics, maybe around legal or land sales, identifiable personnel, or maybe security concerns that should be kept confidential, but there should be very clear bounds around that. And in the coming months, I'm going to be advocating again for some of the policies that council chose not to go with, such as, say, an open meetings bylaw, where any member of the public, just like in Ontario, can have an independent authority to go to be able to challenge council's secret meetings. And if they're reviewed and found to be done improperly, those records can be released to the public. And some of it is also, let's say, a little bit more low tech. So in the council chamber of secrets, not everybody knows this, but every single council member gets a lazy boy chair that goes all the way back. So I would say replace those chairs with something a little less comfortable. And it's a good reminder that every city councillor works for Calgarians and not the other way around.
Yeah, well, it's those little things. There's no sense settling in for a long meeting. You'll want to minimize the requisite time to do what you have to do in camera and then get back out to it. Perhaps.
Well, I might get in trouble for mentioning the lazy boys, but
move the lazy boys. Move the lazy boys into the main council chambers, and we can see you utilizing them. But we know you're going to be comfortable in your spots to get down to the business in front of the electorate.
I'll give them for the people who are there watching our 12-hour meetings.
There we go. For all of you guys, whether councillors I agree with or don't, the endurance you have to deal with some of those long meetings, I can't imagine. But, well, thank you very much for giving me that much time today. I know, like I said, it's a busy time. Council's the hornet's nest that it always is, and you're juggling that with your mayoral campaign. So where can we keep up with you, or where can folks get in touch with you and see how your campaign's going?
Yeah, so it's just www.jeromy.ca. Bunch of different links there. You can see more about me, my proposed platform, policies. If you like what you see, you can contact us to learn more. Happy to follow up with anybody directly. But also, we rely on grassroots support. We're definitely not supported by the establishment or some of the typical big players in Calgary politics. And if we are successful in the October election, it's going to be because of everyday volunteers that have had enough with the current direction, and they'd like to see the city embrace positive change going forward.
Great. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Keep fighting the good fight there. The amount of abuse you've taken and still keep getting up has been something else. And I just like that kind of attitude with people who won't back down. So I'm certain we'll be talking again sometime soon. I'll let you get on with your day and get ready for the weekend. I know you tend to go off to some pretty nice mountain spots and get your clear your mind and body on the weekend so you can get ready to battle again through the week. So thank you one more time, Jeremy, and we will talk again.
Yeah, until next time. Thanks again.
All right. Well, thank you for your patience with my technical challenges there. We'll get better with our recorded interviews. It's just hard to always get somebody to be able to come on live. So I thought I'd try recording it, playing it through, because it is acute, and municipal politics are coming up more now that the incumbent mayor Nenshi has decided to step down. And, something I was looking at, so it's been breaking, just for a great example of how screwed up Calgary City Hall is. And it's screwed up, and the waste that goes on there. So this story is just broken today. A City of Calgary employee last year, between June and October, so in the middle of the pandemic, she charged $94,818 in overtime. 714 hours of overtime between June and October, apparently. And she fired 3 other workers in that office, saying there wasn't enough work for them because of the pandemic. And since then, she's gone on sick leave, so she's home on a vacation. This is what's going on with Calgary City Hall. I understand not every city worker is pulling off crap like that. But when you hear Nenshi getting up there and some of the others saying there's just no more room to cut spending, we can't get any more efficient. Oh, spare me that bull crap. Look at that. She took more in overtime in a few months than most people make in a year. And then it's sitting at home in full pay on sick leave because they got a repugnant sick leave policy for some of these civil servants. There is room to cut, and we're going to have to cut. I mean, post-pandemic, something a lot of government workers, as they're spending like crazy, and bureaucrats and leaders and politicians don't want to talk about, but they're going to have to go head-to-head with those public service unions. Because one of the things Jeremy did say in that interview, he didn't go right after them, because, again, they don't want to get into that battle, but it's a battle that's going to have to happen. Wages are going to have to be cut. That's the largest part of government expenditures, and we can't afford it. So either going to cut the wages or we're going to cut the people. It's up to the unions. You got to put that choice on their lap and say, fine, you talk to your membership. We're going to lay off 20% of them, or we're going to cut your wages by 20%. But there's your choices, because we're too bloated. We don't have the money. We're recovering from the restrictions in this pandemic mess and nightmare. So it's time to get it in order. I hope to see some leadership. When we see the leadership on every front level of government right now, I am not very confident to see them do those necessary battles and make those tough choices in the future. But hopefully, we can keep pressuring and keep pushing. Got a federal election coming up this year. I can't say I've got a lot of hope for that either. By the way, I forget what time it is coming at. There is a rally, I guess, at the Edmonton legislature today. Some people are going to be pushing back against the restrictions, and hopefully that's a good turnout and peaceful and rational, and they won't be talking about lizard people and crazy things as I've seen at other rallies. I think more, just concerned citizens are starting to come out. They're finally having enough. As I said, these rolling restrictions, these crushing restrictions, this misery that just seems to be interminable. They've had enough. And again, I just want to remind you, there is a rodeo at the end of the month. This will be a fun way to push back. Alberta Health Services is already warning Ty. They're saying, we're going to shut you down. And Ty's saying, good luck. He's got backup plans. If they shut down the first venue, there'll be another one. It's going to be in Bowden or Bowden area right near there either way. At the end of the month, 3 solid days. It'll be fun. Get out, bring the kids. There's camping, or you can just do a day trip. It's only an hour out of Calgary. And it's rodeo.rally@gmail.com. Or if you look on Facebook, there's it's Northcott Rodeos Incorporated. So you can keep up with what's going on there. I would just love to see a couple thousand people, a few thousand, whatever it takes. Get out there for a day. It'll be a nice day at the end of April. Or get out for a couple of days. He's got a whole bunch of events. Take in something as Western and pure as Alberta Rodeo. Socialize, get around people, be happy, live normal a little bit again. And I just dare the government to try and stop it. How will you stop that? I've been up there. I went to his ranch. As I said, that interview is all up on YouTube, on our YouTube channel up there. Have a look. They're not going to be able to stop this. So let's get out and have some fun. Let's show who's really in charge of this province. It's us. They work for us. And you don't tell us what we can do, what we can't do. It's time. It's stopped. The pandemic is in retreat. We've got to get on with life here. So thank you for tuning in. Thanks to that panel. That was great having those guys on. It's so important to talk about the whole thing. The impacts of these restrictions, the costs of what's coming down. So if you haven't subscribed already to the Western Standard, get on there. Dave Naylor, we got a few writers on there. They do some great stuff. The one that's sticking in my mind is Dave, because he's been doing that expose on the character assassination of Caitlin Ford. Those have been coming out every few days. It's just a horrible, horrible piece of treachery and sickness that happened. And the mainstream media fed it. Caitlin's suing CBC, I believe, and the Toronto Star. Good on her, and I hope she wins and bleeds those parasites dry. They ruined her on a shaky basis after some sick stalker took an interest in her, and she's not taking it lying down. So follow that with Dave Naylor and the rest of the folks putting the stories up. Subscribe. It keeps us rolling. Subscribe to the YouTube. Subscribe to the Facebook. I'll be back again on Friday for my show. I'll have a couple of guests to speak on again. Then tomorrow we've got the show with Nathan. I gotta learn how to pronounce his name. Guide. And he's out of Prince George. Great young guy. He's had some good guests. I think he's going to have Sloan coming on there as one guest and another. I should write notes down for these things. But he's really great to listen to. And it's broadening our reach into BC there and covering different issues. So be sure to turn into that live tomorrow. Get your questions into Nathan. We don't need to listen to the old talk radio anymore. We've got something else. It's developing. It's replacing it. We can talk with each other. We're not afraid of touching the sticky issues. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys on Friday.